The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Safeway stores.
Whenever you're sailing on a luxury liner or dining at the best hotel in town, one of the most magnificent pieces on the coal buffet may well be a turkey galantine glittering in aspic. Here it is, and we're doing one today on the French Chef. Welcome to the French Chef. I'm Julia Child. Today we're doing a turkey galantine, and that is a boned, stuffed turkey which is cooked and then served in aspic. I'm not trying to kid you around that this is a quick and easy recipe. It is definitely a recipe for people who like to cook, love to work with their hands, and have the time to do it. And this is how it looks. Here is your turkey here that's all been boned, and when you open it up, the stuffing is inside. I'm going to unfold it so you can see how it looks. See, here's where the dark meat was, and there's where the white meat was on either side, and there are no bones in it at all because see, this is where the wing bones were, and that has been boned, and then the wing skin has been pushed back into the flesh. Now, you know how to bone a turkey because we've already done it, so I don't have to go into any more details. And this is a meat stuffing, which is one part, that's a French pâté stuffing, which is one part veal and one part pork finely ground, and then the diced turkey meat, which you've sliced off, and anything else in keeping, such as boiled ham or pistachio nuts and truffles, and then you put in 1 beaten egg for every 2 cups of ground meat. And because there are so many steps in making a turkey galantine, I've got it ready in various stages so that you won't miss any part of it. So when you have your turkey all boned and the stuffing in, you bring the turkey skin around it and have it in a nice sausage-shaped roll, and then you don't have to sew it up. You wrap it up in a damp towel, and you want to use a damp towel because you can stretch it nicely. If you wrapped it in a dry towel, as soon as it was damp, as soon as it got wet, then it would stretch out. And what we want to do is to hold the turkey in a sausage shape all during its cooking. And then you be sure that you see there's your flap there, and you want to be sure that you put the edge of the towel right against the flap, and then you push so that you're going to get everything as tight as possible, and then you just roll up. You see I'm pushing and rolling so everything will remain tight. And be sure that when you're using a towel that it's thoroughly washed and thoroughly rinsed so that there will be no taste of soap in it. And now we're going to tie it up, and for this you twist the ends because we want to have this just as tight as possible and get some nice soft white string, and twisting the ends like that, make a double tie around. This would really be easier to do with 2 people. And then tie it right up close to the meat, like that. And then do the same thing with the other side. Give her a good twist, and then, no, I didn't cut off my string. There's a good twist, and then a tight tie. And whenever you're working with ground meat, particularly pork and veal, it spoils quickly as soon as it's exposed to the air. So although you can get your turkey all boned and stuffed and ready to go ahead of time, You could do it, say, a day ahead of time, but it would be much, but you really should keep it well chilled and cook it as soon as possible. And now we're going to tie the circumference. So, because this you have to have it, keep its shape. So you make one tie around the middle. I find that twisting the string, it keeps you can tie it easier without having the string slip. In fact, I'm going to give it a double twist around and then twist it around that way. And you want to tie it quite tight. And then here's our third tie. There. You know, when you have a boned and stuffed turkey like this, you can roast it if you want. In that case, you wouldn't wrap it in a towel. You probably have to sew up the edge of the skin or skewer it, and then you would tie it in exactly the same way. But what we're going to do is to poach it, and we're going to cook it in a liquid, and that's why we have the towel. And I always like to use a meat thermometer. These cost about 98 cents to $1, and you can buy them in any supermarket. And then if you have a meat thermometer, there's no question of when it's done. Then you're going to have to sacrifice a bit of the towel, get a little sharp knife and go right through, that's the seam edge there, and then stick the thermometer right in. And you want to be sure that the point of the thermometer goes right down into the middle of the meat. And we're going to poach this, and to poach means that we're going to cook it in a liquid. It's going to cook very slowly, barely simmering, and this is just like poaching an egg. And this is a rather large egg to poach, so I'll have to get myself a large thing to do it in. And so I'm going to use the bottom of my covered roaster. And so in goes your Galantine. And then we're going to have vegetables in. Those are some chopped carrots, about 2 or 3. And then we have some chopped onions. There's about 2 or 3 of them. And then 2 or 3 celery stalks. You can just break them in half and just use the outside celery stalks. And then any bones that you have. These are part of the bones from the turkey. And then if you have any raw veal or pork bones, particularly the knuckles, particularly the veal knuckles would be very good. And then here's our turkey carcass. And be sure that you don't omit to put that in, because it's delicious. If you haven't done turkey soup with a raw turkey carcass, you have a treat coming to you. And then you cover it with liquid, and this can be your own homemade turkey stock. I'm not chopping up this carcass. It ought to be chopped up, but I just wanted to see you how it looked. And then you want to cover it by 2 inches with stock. I haven't got quite enough in here, but you want to cover it so that it comes up by about 2 inches, and you can either use your homemade stock, or you can use canned consomme and water. And then this is to simmer uncovered for about, this is an 8.5 pound turkey, and I have about 6 cups of meat stuffing into it, and it will take about 2.5 hours to cook. It really depends on what the circumference is. This is about 5 inches in diameter, and it will take around 2.5 hours, and the meat thermometer should read between 180 and 185. And this will be, when you bring it up to the simmer over moderate heat, it will take about 20 to 30 minutes to come up to the simmer. And then you just remember that you cook it uncovered. And then when it is done, when your thermometer is 180 to 185, you let it sit in the poaching liquid for an hour, and it will absorb flavor. Now I have one here that's already done, and it's sitting in its liquid, and it has sat for an hour, and it is ready to come out. And the reason you want it to sit in the liquid is that it absorbs all the flavors from your stock. and it also makes the meat more juicy. And you have a big tray, and then you're going to take it out. It's all dripping. You can see why you want the tray. And then you have to let it cool to room temperature, and you want to cool it under a weight. And the reason you want to cool it under a weight is that you want the meat stuffing to firm up. And you know, we have the eggs in it, and the eggs hold the stuffing together, but you don't want to have any air holes. So get a board or a loaf pan. I have just a plain old board here, which is covered with aluminum foil, and set that on top, and then put some weights on it. Just anything you have. I just happen to have some actual weight type weights, but you could use pieces of a meat grinder, or you could fill a quart measure with water. You want about 5 pounds of weight, and then you have to be sure that it doesn't fall down. Sometimes it's a little bit wiggly, and so you want to let that cool to room temperature, and that will take probably 4 or 5 hours. And then you take off the weights and put it in the, and unwrap it and untie it and put it in the, my weights came off. I'm just going to weight it off without the board. I told you that might happen. So now, when you have your Galantine all cooked, and when it has thoroughly chilled in the refrigerator, you can then slice it and use it just as it is. But if you want to be a little more fancy, you can decorate it in aspic. And if you want, the simplest way to decorate an aspic would be to use a very good brand of canned consommé with gelatin in it and a little bit of wine flavoring, and that is very quick and easy to do. But you have your whole makings for a perfectly delicious aspic here, and the aspic is, all it is jellied meat stock, which is just meat stock like consommé with gelatin in it. And here we have a perfectly delicious makings, but you can't use it as it is until you have degreased it. I'm just going to do a token here so you can see how it works. You would strain the whole business into a pan, and then the easiest way of degreasing would be to, because you're going to have plenty of time here, would be to put all of your aspic in the refrigerator and wait until the fat had congealed, and then you can simply scrape the fat off after it is chilled. And then what you would do would be to heat your meat stock a little bit, and then you have to do the final degreasing, which would be to take strips of paper towel. Degreasing is never easy. You would take strips of paper towel and draw them over the surface to eliminate the last globules of fat. You see, it's just a towel, and you just have to do it in strips, and then just do it like that. And then after that, you still can't use it because you don't have your gelatin in. And the gelatin, we've done this a great many times, so I don't have to do it exactly for you. You would use 1 package or 1 tablespoon of unflavored powdered gelatin, and you would sprinkle for every 2 cups. That's 1 tablespoon for every 2 cups, and you would sprinkle it on and let it melt thoroughly, and then you would heat it and stir it until all the granules of gelatin had completely dissolved, and then you're ready to use it. And that's just what this stage is here. This has been degreased, and the gelatin has been added, and you can use it just as it is now. But as you will notice, it's a little bit cloudy, and if you want to be even fancier, you can clarify it. And clarification is rendering a meat stock limpid and sparkling, and it's a fascinating process to use, and I think you will enjoy seeing it. And what you clarify with egg whites, And the egg whites act as a magnet. And as you heat your liquid, the egg whites sort of attract all the cloudy bits. So for each 5 cups of stock that you have, you use 2 egg whites and you put them in a bowl. And then you have a little bit of cold stock. This is all part of your 5 cups. And you mix this in and you beat it around with a wire whip, and so that the egg whites are thoroughly mixed in. And then you have the rest of your stock, which is hot, and you gradually beat this in. This is the same thing you do anytime that you're using eggs and they're going to be heated. You have to put some cold liquid with them first and then gradually beat in the hot liquid. And then when these are gradually warm, you pour this back into your saucepan with the hot stock. And then you set it over heat, and then you agitate it gently until it comes up to the simmer. And it'll take about 5 minutes for the egg whites to begin to coagulate, and you think, my heavens, it's all turned very cloudy and milky. But just as it comes just to the simmer, the egg whites will coagulate, and you'll see this is a very strange looking sight here. You can see there are bits of coagulated egg white, and then around them there's this lovely, clear, sparkling stock. And then, when you've done that, you then strain it. Now, this queer contraption is a bowl with a colander, because you don't want the, well, I'll say why the colander, because you're going to strain this through a sieve through several thicknesses of cheesecloth, and you don't want the cheesecloth to hit the surface of the liquid that's going in. And you want very, very carefully and delicately to ladle this mixture into the sieve. And this wet cheesecloth holds back all the coagulated bits of egg white. And be sure that you use well-washed cheesecloth, because it often has sort of a medicinal taste. I'm not going to do all of this, I just want you to see how it is. And then you allow, after you have it all in, you allow it to strain through, and as you can see, it's going through very, very slowly, and you don't want to hurry it. You don't want to squeeze the cheesecloth, because if you do, you will then have disturbed the egg whites, and your stock will get cloudy again. I'm going to remove some of this so you now can see what your stock looks like when it gets down into the bowl. As you will see, this is perfectly clear and beautiful and sparkling, and it's just the way it should be. And now when you have your aspic all ready, you see you have, this is jellied and this is clear and it's beautiful, and you're all ready to use it. And we're going to use it for 2 things. The first thing we're going to do is to enrobe our turkey galantine so it has a cloak, and then we're going to use some more of it to make jelly cutouts and decorations. So you have to have, I always find that when you're going to make one of these jellies, any kind of a decoration, it's best to have twice as much jelly as you think you need, because you always seem to need a little bit more. Now I have here a pan, and this is going to be for the jelly cutouts, and it's lined with very lightly oiled wax paper. You just oil it very lightly and then wipe off the excess oil, and then pour a layer of jelly into it. You want about a ½ inch layer. I'm not using that much, I just want you to get the idea. And then you set this in the icebox to chill. I'm going to pretend that this is the refrigerator. It certainly doesn't look like one. And then you have the platter that you're going to use for your decoration, and you pour another layer of your aspic into that and let that set in the refrigerator. That's about you want to put in about a 3/8 inch layer. And then this again goes into the refrigerator, not on top of it, so that it will set. And then you're ready to decorate your turkey. And we have here a cooked, chilled, and unwrapped galantine. And it looks just like that. There is the seam, and when it's just sitting there, you can't tell, you can't see the seam at all. And then we get out the rest of our decoration. We have here the platter, and we have here our set jelly, which I'm going to move over. And now we're going to slice part of the turkey and then keep some of it whole. So you just start slicing it. You can see how wonderful it is to have a boned turkey because it's so easy to carve. As you can see, the meat gelatin has stayed in, I mean the meat stuffing has stayed nicely. And I'm going to say slice about 4 or 5 pieces and then arrange it around the edge of the platter. As you can see, you could perfectly well serve this just as it is without a decoration. And then you would put, I think, a fairly large piece of it unsliced in the center of the platter. You can see why you want your platter decorated with jelly, because that gives you your foundation. And you have here, you see there's the turkey meat, and here's a little bit of sliced turkey, and it makes a very pretty pattern. And then we have the rest of our aspic, which we will use for coating the turkey. I just want to give you an idea of how you go about this. I'm not going to do a complete decoration because we don't have time, and we've already done some. You pour this is your bowl of ice, and I've just poured some of the aspic into a small saucepan, and then you set it in ice, and you don't start your decorating until the gelatin has almost set and has become syrupy. If you try to put it on at this stage when it isn't cold enough, it won't stick onto the turkey at all. So what you always do is have a large pan of melted gelatin and then a small pan that you allow to chill. And while that's chilling, I can unmold my set jelly for the decorations. I'll take a piece of wax paper and then turn the whole thing upside down, and then you just undo the paper and peel off this paper. See, I think this is a very good system because we can do any kind of cutouts that we want, and that's why it's very lightly oiled. I made the mistake of allowing this paper to sort of turn under the jelly. But now we've got to go back and keep an eye on this aspic that's in here. That's almost ready to go. I'm just going to stir it around. And then I'm going to start spooning this over the turkey. And you'll notice that your first layer of gelatin will never set very well. You spoon a one layer over. This could still be a little bit more set, but I want to be sure that you see all the various parts of this. Then you can usually come back and spoon a little bit more on. And then you put it back into the refrigerator and then give several more coats. And then after you've given several coats and you build up about a 1/16 inch layer, you can then start in with your jelly decorations. And you can take a big knife and we can make a great big diamond on the top of the turkey. And if you're a really artistic type, you can do the most wonderful things with these jelly decorations. And I hope this is going to come off. That isn't. I'm going to do a smaller one. If you just want to make small diamond cutouts, you can just cut them like that. There's probably a way of getting a great big piece of jelly off. I think probably you put it on you'd cut it out and transfer it with wax paper and then take the wax paper off. So you would decorate the top in each piece And then when you were through, you see there are always these little dribbles of jelly, so you chop your remaining jelly, and you just put them all around, and that cuts, and that covers up any dribbles that you may have made. I'm going to move this over so you can see it a little bit better. And then on each piece, if you have truffles, they would be very nice. You would add them on and then glaze them with a little bit of jelly. You see, you can make any kind of decoration with jelly. I'm doing only just the very simplest one. And then you must be sure that your aspic is perfectly delicious to eat, because every once in a while, if you go out to some place that thinks it's being fancy, and all they've done is just put some gelatin in some colored water, and it doesn't have any taste at all. But the gelatin aspic is supposed to be just as delicious as your Galantine, and it makes a perfectly beautiful combination. I think I'll put a little bit more of this chopped jelly around so that you can see the idea of it. And then, of course, if you wanted, I think probably if I'd had more time, I would have sliced it and arranged a lot more slices around the platter so it would be easy to serve. But I think you always want to leave a whole bit so that people can see the full magnificence of your boned turkey. And you would do boned duck just exactly the same way, or a capon. And this is really a sample of how you do an aspic. Now I want you to see at this point a masterpiece of decoration so that you can see what can be done. This was done by my friend Rosie, who's staying with us, and she's an artist and a ceramicist. And just look at what she's done. She's very good with her hands and has a lovely eye for things. We have around the edge of the platter here are the little jelly cutouts, and then these little black parts here are olives. They could very well be truffles. And then we have this white here, which is hard-boiled egg, and the yellow is just the egg yolk. And then the green, this is a green leaf here, and that is simply green onion tops which have been blanched in water and then chilled and decorated. So you can see, with imagination and an artistic idea, you can do a great deal with decoration. I want you to see how it looks when it goes onto the plate. And then you always serve a nice bit of jelly with it. So try my Galantine system. You make all the fixings and then get a nice, clever friend to do the decorations, and you have a perfectly wonderful dish. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.